Hi, it's Mrs. Pope, and today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. This is one of my favorite formulas, and I absolutely love it. Hopefully you will too. If not, at least just learn how to do it. Okay, so the quadratic formula, the goal is to use this formula to solve any quadratic equation. It's kind of like completing the square, where you can do this with any quadratic equation and solve it. When you're solving it, what I mean is finding the zeros, or finding the roots, or finding the solutions. Here is the quadratic formula. Write it down, memorize it, because you will be required to memorize it. It's not that bad. And the way we say it is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right. So this is used for any quadratic in this form, in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And the answers that you'll find out, they will be your solutions, roots, zeros, and this is, of course, where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So now that we know what it does, let's try it out. So example 1. Let's solve x squared plus 8x plus 16 is equal to 0. Well, first I want you to label a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 8, c is 16. And then you'll notice the steps that I have over here. Step 1, find what we call the discriminant. And we're going to use this later. It's very important. We'll use this later. It tells us all kind of information. But right now, we're just going to find it. B squared minus 4ac. So we want to find that first because it'll help us simplify when we're putting it all into that big, long equation. So step 1, let's find b squared. So 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. So we should have b squared minus 4ac. You should have 64, this is an interesting one, 64 minus 64, which of course is equal to 0. So I found my discriminant. Just hold on tight to that because we're going to use it when we plug it in. Now we're going to plug this into the big old equation. Alright, so x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root, and we've already found what's under here, the square root of b squared minus 4ac. That's why we found that. So we can just plug our number in here that we found. So the square root of 0 all over 2 times a. And of course a is 1, so all over 2, because it would really be 2 times 1. So let's see how we break this down. The plus minus means there's going to be 2 answers. And think about it, most parabolas cross the axis 2 times, so there should be 2 answers in most cases. So here, let's say x is equal to negative 8 plus 0, that's square root of 0 is 0, all over 2. Or x is equal to negative 8 minus 0 all over 2. Now, this case happens to be the same one because 0 doesn't matter. So x is equal to negative 4. X is equal to negative 4. So really that means since they're the same solution, we really just have one solution. Negative 4, 0. That's where this crosses the x-axis. So you can tell this parabola actually only touches it one time because the solutions are exactly the same. Alright, let's look at another example. Solve. And I made a note, must be set equal to 0 before you can start using the quadratic formula. So what would this be set up easy and ready to use? Think about that. This is not ready for the quadratic formula. I need to move that 11 because it needs to be set equal to 0. So I'm going to first subtract 11 from both sides. So we'll be working with x squared minus 10x minus 11 is equal to 0. Step 1, find b squared minus 4ac. A is 1, b is negative 10, c is negative 11. So if we're going to find this, we want to take b, negative 10, squared minus 4 times a times c. You see where I plugged all of those in? Just got them from here. I'm just plugging things in. If you calculate all that, you'll end up with 100 minus negative 44, or 100 plus 44. So this turns out to be 144. Hold on tight to that so we can use it when we plug it into the formula. So let's go. Quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b. Well, this b is already negative 10. So switch that to positive 10 because we want the opposite of b. So 10 plus or minus the square root of 144 all over 2a. A is 1 again here, so it's just 2. Here's our two answers. Breaks down into two separate answers. X equals positive 10 plus, what's the square root of 144? Good. And then we also have x equals 10 minus 12 over 2. So these are our two answers. 10 plus 12 over 2 is going to be equal to 11. And then 10 minus 12 over 2 is going to be equal to negative 1. So we have our two answers. That means this parabola crosses the x-axis twice, where x is equal to negative 1 and where x is 11. So you can have an idea of what this parabola looks like. The zeros, you can write them 11, 0, and negative 1, 0. That's where these cross the x-axis. Alrighty, I believe this is our final example. No, we have one more after this. Solve. Let's use the quadratic formula. Here we go. A, B, C, 3, 5, 4. Now let's find b squared minus 4ac. 5 squared minus 4 times a times c. So this one's a little different. Let's see what we end up with. 25 minus 48. So we end up with negative 23. Ooh, this is going to be fun. So x is equal to, here's the quadratic formula, opposite of b, plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2 times a, which is going to be 6. So now you may be saying, well, what's happening here? Remember, this is an imaginary number, so we can't simplify it. There's nothing I can take out of there. We can actually, this is fine, leaving it just like this. This is a value. We're going to leave it here, and this is the way you want to do it because you can't simplify the square root of negative 23. So when you have a radical under here, it can't be simplified. I can't come up with any actual number solutions. So when we have imaginary solutions, that means it doesn't cross the x-axis. Because the solutions that we would find if we did would be imaginary. And imaginary means they're not there. All right. Now we have one more example. So remember, look at this one. X squared minus 6x is equal to negative 10. There's something you should be doing first. You want to add 10 to both sides, so it's set equal to 0. So really we have x squared minus 6x plus 10 is equal to 0. A, B, and C, 1, negative 6, and 10. Plug it in. B squared minus 4ac. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10. If we do that, we're going to end up with 36 minus 40. We're going to end up with a negative 4. So we have x is equal to, here's the quadratic formula, opposite of b. It's already negative 6, so we're going to make it positive 6. 6 plus or minus square root negative 4 all over 2. Now before we left the radical negative under the radical and left it alone, but we can actually simplify this. We know that the square root of negative 4 is just going to be 2i. So we can say x is equal to 6 plus 2i over 2, or x is equal to 6 minus 2i over 2. The last thing we would need to do is simplify these because we can simplify the fractions. So remember, I like to write the a plus bi. We write the real and then imaginary. So really this is going to be 6 over 2 plus 2i over 2. This will be 6 over 2 minus 2i over 2. 6 over 2, of course, is just 3. 2 over 2 is 1, so 3 plus I. 6 over 2, 3 minus 1i. So our two answers here would be 3 plus I and 3 minus I. And that's just how we would write them. These, though, however, are complex solutions, which means they're not real, so they're really, this parabola actually does not cross the x-axis. Thanks for watching, and remember, you are responsible for your own learning.